All right. Welcome, everyone. So this is the 5 things I wish I knew about my quote to cash process, order to cash process. I know we went back and forth on that. So I am Mike Flynn. I work for Rapid7. Rapid7 is a security company, and generally we help you answer 3 questions. Am I vulnerable? Am I compromised? Am I optimized? And so at a high level, we can look at a lot of different areas of your business and see what may be vulnerable from a security standpoint. And we have a whole host of products and people to help you do that.
Right on. And I am Kyle Jackson, Director of Business Systems at Seismic, which is a sales enablement and kind of sales storytelling content platform leveraged by enterprise customers to enable their go-to-market teams. And you can kind of see that we've got like pretty similar tech stacks, almost identical perhaps, other than like you're using G Suite and you're using Office 365. But yeah, that's who I am and who Mike is, and we're stoked to kick it off.
Absolutely. Yeah, we put the tech stack on there in case you have specific questions about our order to cash process. We're happy to dive into some details. The presentation will stay at a higher level until someone kind of pokes us to go deeper. So, and you can double click on the slides to make it full screen. I don't think it may not be necessary for this presentation, but we're going to talk about order to cash. So where else to start other than White Claw? So White Claw claims they outsold Budweiser last year, and they sold 1.25 billion with a B, and that's a lot of cans. Ain't no laws when you're drinking claws, except maybe if you are handling billions in orders, you better have figured out your order to cash process. Next slide. Good thing about White Claw is that you don't have to drink 12 of the same flavor. You can mix it up. And this is a picture of flavor collection number 2. When White Claw goes to create flavor collection number 3, and they may have already created it, but when they go to create it, do you think that they built out their entire packaging line to build a new variety pack? Or do you think they made this available to everyone simultaneously across all their markets? Of course not. They want to make sure that what they put into this new bundle will actually sell before they put it into their full billion-dollar process. And more specifically, what happens if White Claw decided they wanted to target industries that were affected by the COVID-19 pandemic? Rapid7 had a similar thing. We're not selling mango drinks to help people unwind, but we wanted to make sure there was a demand before fully building out all of our processes to bring something to market. Next slide. So we were learning new things about our customers every day. COVID-19 was really accelerating this digital transformation, and the way our customers were using our products was shifting very rapidly. And so we were keeping track of how people were using our services and our software, and we wanted to share those same successes with other companies in a similar industry. The challenge we have is that it takes a month for us to start being able to process orders on a new bundle. That's not quick enough. We were learning new things daily. We wanted to test out new bundles and see what would work. So we, as business systems professionals, the first thing you think about is let's bring in automation, or let's bring in new technology or new processes to help meet this new demand. But even if we automated and reduced time by 90%, it was still going to take us days to get a new product or a new bundle into the market. And that wasn't fast enough. We needed to be faster. We are being challenged every day to offer new things. So next slide. So what did we do? We created a fast lane process. And this is not automated. It's not integrated, but it is fast. And that is what we are going for. We can begin to process orders for a new product or a new bundle in less than a day now. New product bundles are not stuck in the same traffic. They're not in that right-hand lane. With all of our other development requests, it's not bound by sprint cycles. We can, if there's something that we want to try out in the market, we can do it today. But we do have limits. Once orders reach a certain threshold, we do bring that new offering back into our fully automated integrated process to make use of all of our tools and technology and processes that we have in place. So next slide. The moral of the story is don't solve the pain, or solve the pain. Don't just automate the process. Like I said, our default reaction is to add technology or refine processes, but those things would have just decreased the pain, not solved it. Solve the pain first, then make it more efficient. Done. Next story.
All right, right on. So this next one is a bit of a hypothetical, and I'll need your imagination to think through it. So picture yourself as a Salesforce admin or architect at a t-shirt company, and you're working on the company's first quote to cash project. You're digging through some of the requirements for orders, and you find that there's a request for a field called size, which makes perfect sense that every time you order a t-shirt, you need to select size. But the possible values that are being requested for this field are small, medium, large, and cotton. You would probably immediately grimace, and it's going to be obvious to anyone and everyone that one of these things is really not like the others, and there's probably a mistake somewhere in the requirements gathering that you need to go track down. But it's kind of interesting because in my experience as an admin and working on these projects and other types of projects, I actually see this all the time. And I think if you're an admin, you've probably been asked to create something like this. And I actually like to call them conflated concept columns. And I'm guilty of creating them. And I think if you think about it, you probably are too. If you were to kind of keep going with this design, you can quickly see what happens. You need a selectable value for every possible combination. You need small cotton, medium polyester, large, I don't know, blend of something. And if you have a lot of combinations, then it gets unwieldy very quickly. So it's a bit of a highly exaggerated example, but I do think it highlights a real issue for systems and how you design systems. And I think even though you might not think of yourself as an admin of a SQL server, you are designing a database whenever you do one of these projects. And there's a concept from the database world that I think has some interesting thoughts about this. And back in the 70s, a bunch of people were kind of coming up with some formalized best practices for how to design relational databases. And one of the names of this kind of first best practice document was called the first normal form. And one of the requirements to meet that form is that a relation is in the first normal form if and only if the domain of each attribute contains only atomic values, which is a fancy way to say that like one concept per column per field. And there's, I think, a lot of obvious reasons for that. And there's some less obvious reasons, and we don't have time to get way into them. But if you're a systems person and you've kind of never dove into some of these database design principles, I highly recommend it because I think there's a ton of really valuable and useful information there and frameworks and stuff like that. Now, if you're wondering like what this has to do with quote to cash, I think it's relevant because there's an enormous amount of design work to do in a quote to cash project. And there's something about them that it tends to create really subtle examples of this, or you might be tempted to do this. So I wanted to look at an example of one that came up in a former project that I was working on. So if you're a SaaS company like we are, one of the most important processes you have is creating contracts and renewing contracts. And tracking renewals and tracking churn are probably the most important metrics that you track. It's subtle, but this is actually also a conflated concept column. It seems to make sense at first glance that these belong together, and they kind of do. But there really are two concepts here. One is a sequence-based stage of a contract's nitrile lifecycle. Like you draft it, you redline it, then you sign it, and it activates, and eventually it's going to expire. And then these second two values, they represent the decision that's made by a customer on whether or not they want to renew, thus creating a new contract, or churn and, just have it expire. So these are kind of tempting, and this is one that we debated a lot. And if you were to go implement something like this in this way, I certainly couldn't tell you that you are wrong. There might be good reasons to do it. It might make something simple. It might make some things hard. But I think it's important to dig into these and constantly kind of thinking with a database design mentality, because at some point in the future, an analyst is going to be trying to work with the design that you came up with. And it's quite likely that that analyst will be you. So do yourself a favor. Moral of the story is to perfect your first normal form.
Yes, and that story definitely resonated with me because our customer, we have a status field in our customer that does the same thing. And it's probably the number one question I get is, why is this customer not active, or why is it say customer lost? And then we, of course, tie a lot of things to it, like Gainsight. We only suck in customer active accounts. And if you don't have that logic, but now I know what to call it, the CCC term. So,
yeah.
All right.
Right on. All right. Mr. Gordon.
Meet Gordon Ramsay. So most of you would recognize him as a master chef. He uses his multiple TV shows and social media accounts to share his creations. So next slide. He recently shared something that he called, quote, the most amazing carbonara. And it got a pretty strong reaction. Here's what it looked like. So my wife, who is a Gordon Ramsay fan, described this as yellow vomit. And actually the article that I got this story from was titled Italians Revolt Over Carbonara. So not a great reaction. Next slide. So I couldn't read the Italian comments, but I did grab a couple of the English ones. And you can see one person said, looks like Kraft dinner. One person said 5 hens died to supply that quantity of eggs. So the goal of making a meal is to delight the people who are eating it. And delight was not quite the reaction. I think we can all agree that Gordon Ramsay has the skills and the talent to make an excellent meal. He probably has the highest end cookware in his kitchen, and he can probably make hundreds of this meal for a dinner rush. So in short, he has the people, the process, and the technology to deliver what he's trying to do. And honestly, this card you've ever had, but the end result, do you think his customers were satisfied with this? Based on the Twitter reaction, no. So Rapid7 is going through something similar. We have spent the last 3 years really spending a lot of time and money into investing into our order to cash process. We brought in the best of breed tools. We hired talented people, and we have some excellent and efficient processes. But up until a couple months ago, if you tried to pay one of your invoices, you either had to mail us a check or someone called you and you gave your credit card number over the phone. And we are a security software company, and we are taking credit card numbers over the phone. That's a PCI compliance nightmare. It's also not a great customer experience. We also have some challenges with our quoting and invoicing process. And this is something that when we were talking about this before the presentation, it resonated with Kyle because Kyle is a Rapid7 customer. Mm-hmm. Let's look at a quote. So this is a sample quote. I totally made up these numbers, but the data it's all here. And notice I'm not giving a talk on how to design a pretty quote, so just take it that this quote is okay. And let's compare that to the invoice. The first thing you're going to notice, these do not look the same. And we get a lot of questions from customers about what are they actually paying for, especially our large enterprise customers with complicated orders. So a couple of examples of what is different. If you can go to the next slide. The first thing is that the line items are different between the quote and the invoice. We also, for multi-year deals on the quote, you get multiple line items. They're consolidated on the invoice. The order is different of these items. Next slide. The multi So multi-year deals are listed separately on the quote. They're grouped together on the invoice. Contract language is different. Next slide. Lot to show you on the differences between the quote and the invoice. And then when you look at the discount lines, in the quote, it's all in line. We break it out on separate line items in the invoice. And it doesn't matter how good our technology is, that we use best of breed tools. It doesn't matter how good our people are. It doesn't matter how refined our process is, because what we are delivering to the customer, the end presentation is not great. And this has an impact on what our customers think of our products and what they think of our company. Even though this is not actually what we're delivering from a product perspective. So we'll get to the moral of the story. Last slide. The moral of the story is focus on the customer experience. And I want to note here that customers are not internal to our company. We do projects with order management and RevOps, but those are not our customers. So when I say focus on customer experience, this is not the experience of our internal teammates. Those are our business partners. They don't pay our company a dime. Make sure that your customers have a great experience.
Right on. Yeah, I'm looking at, I think our Rapid7 renewal is in September, so I'm looking forward to seeing the order form and invoice.
Hopefully you see the results of this project where we have the quote should match the invoice now. Hopefully, fingers crossed.
All right, I'll send everybody screenshots once I get those.
Absolutely.
All right, moving on to the next. So this is a real story, but I still want you to kind of imagine yourself in this scenario. So let's say you're in a stakeholder meeting for your ongoing orders to cash project. You're reviewing requirements, and somebody asks a slightly sarcastic question that results in a confounding debate on a topic you really weren't expecting to be particularly consequential. Everyone gets somewhat exasperated and looks like the people in this quote shot from The Office. And you leave the meeting thinking, okay, this is going to be bigger and harder than I anticipated. If I could see you and we could interact, I would ask for any idea what that question might be. But instead, I'm just going to give you 3 seconds to think about what it might have been. Okay, so here's what it was. Somebody says, what is an account really? And I think we're of course talking about like our accounts in our CRM in Salesforce. But you probably had a moment like this where you realize that during the course of a conversation, everybody in the room is using the same words, but in their head, they have a different idea of the meaning behind those words. It's one of the tricky and funny things about language. So what is an account really? The answer is it's different things to different people. I think if you, and it depends on where you sit. Like if you're a marketer, you probably think of your accounts as a hierarchy for an account-based marketing strategy. So you might want to group subsidiaries into like verticals or business models and devote certain kinds of content or programs towards them. Sales is going to think of it in terms of their territories and their a structure for like trying to land and expand certain accounts. Those in customer success or on the support side are going to think of them in how they relate to the actual product and what the customer might be entitled to within that product. And finance, of course, will think of it as billable entities. And sometimes you have a single customer that requests, bills to go in different directions to different entities. So I think that like oftentimes when you're working on one of these projects, it can feel like you're building a bridge from either side of a river and you're planning for how they will align when they finally meet in the middle. But I think if we're all honest, there's a amount of hope that they will nicely align in the middle. And I think this is an interesting metaphor. And if we were to ask the same question about the bridge, like you could say, well, what really is a bridge? And it's going to be different things to different people. To one person, it might mean a faster commute. To another, it's like, the architecture is a work of art. To another, it's the loud train going by their apartment. If you've ever lived in New York, you know what that's like. Or it might be a business opportunity. And I think if you are in a leadership role in working on one of these order to cash initiatives, it's your job to ensure that the end result can successfully be many things to different people. And I also think it's why it's really important to not have your Salesforce admins go do a CPQ project. The scope of that isn't nearly enough. You really have to do like a kind of global company-wide quote to cash initiative that gets everybody aligned on even the most like obvious, seemingly obvious things that you might have taken for granted. So I'm still not exactly sure what the definition of an account is, but we're making it work together. Back to you.
You said it, right? The account can be different based on your perspective. Yep. And you have to make sure you don't pigeonhole yourself into that this is the only thing an account can be. That's why you have that greater cohesive unity on what are we doing with this?
Yep. Yeah. And when you go into it, whoever's like, it's not like someone's idea wins. It's the whatever the nice like merger of everybody's requirements will win. So it's a paradigm shift for everyone.
Yep. Exactly. All right. You ready?
I'm ready. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Meanwhile, the panic of purchasing toilet paper has reached a new low.
Hey, stop!
All right. Instead of me introing the story, I figured they could do it much better. So this is a story from a few months ago. So what happened here? Let me walk you through this. So there are two types of toilet paper. There is, next slide, the toilet paper you use in your house. And then there's the toilet paper that goes to airports, stadiums, and office buildings. Next slide. This model worked perfectly fine. There was no fights in the grocery store over toilet paper. But COVID-19 changed one of the variables. Next slide. Now, everyone is at home. And we don't have access to those giant rolls of sandpaper that they call toilet paper in our office. So what would fix this problem? Next slide. One option is we all go to the offices and steal all the toilet paper, but that is not realistic. Toilet paper manufacturers know exactly how many butts are in their market and how much toilet paper they need to create for all those people. The problem is the toilet paper is just not where people can use it. And you can see where I'm going with this. We had a similar problem at Rapid7, not with toilet paper, but our employees wanted access to something that was difficult to get. And they wanted insight into the state of every order. What stage is the order in? Who has the next action item? Next slide. So we built the order tracker. Maybe not as efficient as Domino's. My wife loves that one, but it had everything. It had alerts to the users for next actions. It had clear identification of blockers for processing orders. It had details on the next steps. Our users loved the design. They were involved. They're excited for it. We built it. We launched it. No one used it. And what went wrong? I mean, Kyle, have you ever built something that your users requested and said they would love and then ended up not using it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think we all have.
Long list of those.
Yeah. So, all right, next slide. Let me give you a little insight into Rapid7 employees. We love Slack, and we've gotten a lot of Slack in today's conference, but there's a reason it's great. And Rapid7 employees spend on average 94 minutes a day on Slack. At the time, the way it was presented to me that Slack themselves only averaged 90 minutes a day. So I took that to mean that Rapid7 loves Slack more than Slack itself. So we made a change to what we were doing with this order tracker. We started pushing the alerts and those action items to users through Slack instead of through Salesforce, where this order tracker was built, and our adoption skyrocketed. So, all right, last slide. The moral of the story is be where your users are. And this is especially important today because not everybody's in the office. We have a lot of people accessing our systems and the information differently than they did even a few months ago. You've got to be where your users are. Our problem wasn't that the data wasn't available or that people couldn't find the information. All the information was already displayed in Salesforce or in Domo or in whatever reporting tool we had set up for those different teams. The problem was people didn't want to go to Salesforce and they didn't want to go to Domo to get that data. We've got to be where our users are. Done.
All right. So it's a little tough to tell because you can't see inside the car given the angle of this picture, but this is a photo of a business systems lead. That's not me. Launching the go live phase of a order to cash project, kicking off training for, the sales staff. And it's right about this moment where the other business systems lead realized that I should have paid attention to the fine print that clearly states that unless you're an absolute professional driver on a closed course, you should not attempt to drive a car off of a ramp and send it soaring through the air. Okay, confession, it was me on a project from a prior job, but I had spent so much time thinking about like the design and architecture of our system. I agonized over page layouts to create the most consistent and good user experience. Wanted pixel perfection on our output documents. But when it came time to plan how we enable our field reps on all of this, I kind of naively thought that a couple of 1 to 2 hour instructional demos would suffice. And if it's not obvious, obviously that was not sufficient. One of the biggest things that I learned is that it's really important to have a professional do your enablement. And I think you should too, because they have skills that while you might possess in addition to all of your systems related skills, do you really have time to devote as much time as it takes to do this well? I think some of the skills that professional educators, trainers, enablers have is they will develop an end-to-end enablement strategy that will consider people who know the current state and need to relearn. They'll consider people who are brand new a year from now and how they'll get up to speed on the same content. They understand the nuances in training one team or region versus another. They do cool things like leverage gamification to get people to show up, keep them engaged. They create compelling content materials. And if I have tools that you might not have immediate access to, like an LMS to create interactive training content, or they may just have a regular training cadence wherein they, meet every month or so to review any new changes to systems or policies or procedures. So it's really, really important to not miss this and have dedicated resources to enabling as you go live. And get them involved as early in the process as possible. Now, at Seismic, I'm fortunate to have a world-class sales enablement team who can pick stuff like this up. But if you're somewhere where you don't have that resource, then I think you do have a few options, and you'll probably have to pick one of them. One is to leverage your third-party consultants. You're probably working with some kind of outsource or third-party services or consultant to do your project. And it's likely that they might have a resource they could dedicate, or at the very least have some templated content that you could repurpose. I also think another option is to borrow an educator from elsewhere in your org. There's probably somebody in your company who is devoted to training customers or partners, or even new hires, and they might be willing to help out. And I guess kind of worst case, if you have to find a systems person on your team to do it, then you really just need to make sure that they have enough separation between configuration and testing duties as they do to enablement, so they can really dive into these things and make sure that they do it justice. So moral of the story is enablement really is the other half of the battle. And it could be easy as systems people to become occupied with all of the work it takes to get a major initiative like this off the ground, but don't neglect devoting resources to sticking the landing. So yeah, that's the 6 stories that we were able to go through there. And these were the takeaways from each one. There's not a single wrap it up takeaway, but we both hope that you have we've piqued your interest, or one of our mistakes you can avoid making, or that we've given you interesting things to think about as you go and embark on your own orders to cash initiatives. So I think with that, we will open it up to Q&A.
I see one question. And Mary is helping us collect these. I'm not skipping over anyone. It's just the first one I see. So there's a question here that says, how do you balance creating the best customer experience and streamlined, simple processes that are easy, quote unquote, to understand and manage with being able to deliver the change in time? Do you always have to start from scratch? That's the question, right? And there's a couple different areas we can go with this. So how do you balance creating the best customer experience with making sure the change is in time? You want to do it right, but as business professionals, I know that most projects I'm on, it's always a time crunch. We are never, I think there's an example at the beginning of the day. They said, what happens if the CFO comes with a bag of money and says you can do whatever you want? I mean, that doesn't happen. No one comes to you and says, hey, you have enough time to do this project. Just make sure you do it right. And what we're doing at Rapid7 is our CEO, and we're lucky that we have a CEO that has really got behind this message, is he came at the beginning of the year and he challenged our entire company. He said, if we are not making a change for a better customer experience, it's not top of our priority list this year. Every project that you do needs to be able to say, how is this going to improve the customer experience? As a software company, we live and die. We are an annual recurring revenue model company. Our customers have to be successful, or next year they won't be customers. And so how do we balance the best customer experience with doing it in time? Is that we start each project by asking, how is this improving the customer experience? And when you start from there, then you make sure that you're headed in the right direction and you're not making something that's just easier from a RevOps perspective or just easier from an order management perspective. Because as business systems professionals, that's where we live every day. And we can get caught in making our teams incredibly efficient and helping Jimmy that sits next to us in the office, helping his day life a little easier. But when we start a project, and you have to get the whole team bought in on this idea, your manager, the leadership, people have to be bought in that we are committed to improving the customer experience. And then that just becomes part of the process. And you still have to work under those time crunches. And I hope I didn't skate around that question.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great answer. And yeah, there are the things that are kind of most important that you have to put in first. But it is a balance, because I doubt anyone would describe their order to cash process as simple. And I often feel like even our simple ones can get quite complicated. And I think it's always a challenge to make something that is inherently complicated easy to understand and manage. And I don't know that there is a silver bullet to it, other than making sure everybody is aligned on what is most important and prioritizing that. And I guess making sure that given those priorities, you still budget some time and effort to thinking through the experience for folks using the system.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it kind of resonates too with the last thing that you talked about, enablement, that we can kind of skip ahead and build something really cool, and that the person who asked for it or the team, they know how to use it really well. But if we don't socialize this and share it out and train people the right way how to use something, all the hard work we did to get it done in time, quote unquote, if nobody's using it or it doesn't solve the actual pain, then that was all wasted time from the get-go. Mm-hmm. So it's something that it's easy to default back to. You got to have good communication, and you've got to have a shared mission. And these are things that and you've got to have a good culture. These are all things that we've heard that it's very nebulous to pinpoint what that means, but you have to find what works for your team and not just get focused too much in what you're doing day to day. I think I'm trying to remember what presentation it was. I think it was the customer experience. Someone said, if you're not measuring it, you can't improve it. And if you're measuring how many story points you execute per week, or the time it takes to process an order, whatever your metric is. If that's what you're measuring, that's what you're going to be focused on. And reality, it's easy for us to measure how many story points we're doing on our teams, or maybe the time savings or process steps that we're saving. But if you start measuring instead things that are meaningful to the customer or meaningful to the company at a larger level, it makes you'll focus in on those initiatives first.
Yep.
All right, let's see what else came up.
Yeah, so this next one is, can you talk about having customers be a part of this, like customer self-checkout versus having the sales rep need to build every single quoting change? I don't know, at least for me in my experience, I have always been in B2B SaaS where all transactions are done through a sales rep, and I've never had a e-commerce component to it. So that's a bit of complexity that I'm kind of grateful to have never had to figure out. But Mike, have you had to, you mentioned that you had like some credit card or online payments, or did you ever have to do that?
Yes. So part of what we did this year, and there's actually a fireside chat about it from Mercado that they put out, but part of what we did to fix this invoicing and quoting and the thing where I said we talked to someone on the phone with a credit card number, we did use, we brought a new technology called VersaPay to help set up a customer portal that they can go in and manage their own invoices and their own notifications. And that was something, and I think, again, I'm going back again to what you said, Kyle, that the pros know how to do it better than we do. VersaPay, they know how to create that customer experience or provide the tools for people to do this. We partnered with them and used their best practices to set this up. We didn't go and build our own invoicing portal. And we were able to justify it based on that customer experience that it was worth the cost of bringing in a new tool. And then using their platform, we were able to deliver that experience. So I forget the original question now because I got up on my soapbox, but was it, how do you involve the end customer in that process?
Yeah. Like if the customer who's using the system is like an end user in a B2C kind of arrangement, like how do you get feedback from them or bring them into the process?
I think that specifically, we have a handful of customers that we have a great relationship with us, and that maybe they've been customers for a while and they'd be very forgiving when we are trying out new things. But in particular project, we had a couple of customers that we presented what we were building to them, probably the ones that were experiencing the most pain. Like our partners get so many invoice notifications through emails, and giving them a way to set up their own notifications and their own schedules and set up payment terms, working with them. We had kind of handpicked some people, kind of like with that Fastlane process that I talked about. We didn't launch this to everybody all at once. We kind of did a pilot project, got a couple people in there, got quick feedback, allowed us to iterate pretty quickly before we launched it out to everybody. All right, let's see, scrolling through. If other people don't have questions, I have questions for you, Kyle.
No, there's another one in here. So the process can be quite daunting to even think about. Do you have any advice on how to get moving without getting into analysis paralysis? I definitely have experience trying to kick off the process and had it stall. And I think trying to make a list of the things that you kind of have to avoid that. You definitely need like exec buy-in at all levels. I think you need a good consultant or third party or project manager if you don't kind of have that at the ready internally. Everybody has to make the time and know that this project is coming and that they need to budget all their own resources, because it's not just a bunch of admins that go and do this. In fact, gathering requirements tends to be the biggest phase. Like figuring out what you have to configure is where most of the work is, not actually going and configuring the system. So yeah, I think just highest level alignment is the way to get going without that requirements gathering just there's got to be some accountability for people to like define the SKUs. There's got to and the approval matrix and like blah blah blah. So they're not accountable at the highest level, then you won't get anywhere.
Yes, the paralysis by analysis is an easy trap to fall into because there's this pressure to always be perfect. And if that's what you're setting out from the get-go, it is pretty daunting because a lot of times you don't know what you don't know. When all the examples we talked about today, we didn't set out to walk into those pitfalls. At the time, we were making the best decisions with the information we had at hand, and we still made mistakes. And what I would say is to get past the paralysis by analysis is, one, deliver something as soon as you can. Get something out there, even if it's not everything for everybody. Pick something that you can do that works towards what your goal is, and then iterate on that. What I've found is sometimes what you think is a big deal isn't a big deal once people start using it. So Kyle, also, I agree with you. It can't be a one team's initiative, because then if you don't get buy-in from, it's not just the admins doing it. It's just like sales ops can't do something just by themselves. You have to get a team committed to what you're aligned around, a mission or a goal, and then the freedom to execute on it and try things out. And again, I'm a big proponent of culture in companies. It's like one of the things I always like to talk about, so I keep coming back to it. But having a strong culture on your team is very important to allow people to take risks and try things out, making sure you do it in a safe way, quote unquote. But it helps you, the paralysis by analysis, you really get nailed by that when you try to be perfect all the time. And Google has a cool thing where they said, how many nines of stability do you need in a project or in a process? And so if you need something that's 4 nines, like 99.99% correct, that's what you target for. If you go higher than that, they're saying you're not being risky enough. You need to take more risk to get it. You need to fail more often, essentially. And it's important. They say no project needs to have 6 nines. And I'm probably misquoting that article because it's been a while for the read, but it was an interesting read saying you dictate what level of risk you can have in something. And if you're above that, take more chances, move faster. If you're below that, take a step back and really solidify your process.
Sweet, right on. So there's another one in here. Regarding getting everyone aligned, do you have a recommended cadence for cross-functional teams besides alignment at the tactical project level? I think in my experience, one cadence would just be like, as requirements get defined well enough to present to another team for feedback. But if that is taking more than like monthly, then you probably should go with monthly. And we've also done like a kind of a C-suite level monthly project check-in, cross-functional alignment meeting, just because you should anticipate that at some point you will be making some big decisions along the way that likely need to go up to the C-suite level to make sure that they're cool with it, or they view things the same way you do. Yeah, I don't know, Mike, what do you think?
I missed part of that. Sorry, my daughter was banging on the door asking for a tablet.
No, it's about getting everybody aligned. Like, what's the kind of recommended cadence for like cross-functional alignment meetings?
Are we talking about on a specific project or just in general amongst teams? What do you think?
I mean, I'm assuming in a one of these like 6-month quote cash initiatives.
I am a big proponent of, like, if you're on this team and you're part of this initiative, we're meeting regularly. Maybe not on a daily basis, but see in here it says besides alignment at the tactical project level, maybe how do we communicate that change upwards? I'm hoping that you have some type of steering committee or someone that you're reporting back to, that whoever your executive owner or sponsor is for this project, that they're engaged enough, that they're asking you to spend time on this, that they want updates, and they're responsible as that sponsor is to socialize this to other areas. As far as a cadence for that, you want to make sure that you're doing it often enough that you're creating momentum. And because if it's too infrequent, the project's going to stall, and you're going to start iterating on those cycles that you're not really delivering much value. One thing that we try to do with our sprint cycles is that we are releasing something at the end of each sprint, or there's something that somebody can see. And when at the end of every cycle or at that tactical project team, whatever your cadence is, someone is looking at it and giving feedback. And if you are delivering something and no one's giving feedback, or it's not going up to whoever the sponsor or the owner, then that's when you need to get more engagement and increase that cadence with sharing what you're working on.
Yep. Yeah, it should definitely accelerate once you leave the requirements gathering phase and start building stuff. As soon as you have anything in your sandbox to show people, you should start showing it to them and getting their feedback.
Exactly. I had a good question for you when you were talking, and I know we've talked about your stories before, and I'm trying to remember what it was. Maybe it was back on the CCC. Like, that one it definitely resonates with me, because we have a field that we sync across NetSuite and Salesforce that talks about what type of account or customer, because again, it means different things in both systems, but they're tied together. And we have one field that says whether you're a prospect or a customer, which means you've actually bought something, and then what state of customer you are. Are you active? Are you lost, like you recently did not renew with us? Or are you like a legacy customer? And trying to think through, we use that field, like you said, there was a good reason that we had it, because it's like a one field, what type of person is this? But we're kind of mixing things in there. And how do you prevent building on top of that field? Or just when you make a decision that maybe you regret later, how do you walk back from that? Do you have any suggestions?
Oof. Yeah. How do you undo these? It can be hard, because they can, like you're saying, if it's a part of an integration that crosses systems, or if there's a lot of different parties using the field in different ways across different reporting platforms, it can be pretty tough to undo them. And I don't know if I have a good strategy for undoing them, other than like working through all of those dependencies and IDing them, and they become little projects. And maybe you do a bunch together. But yeah, they definitely tend to accumulate on things like status fields, on life cycle fields, on things like that, where like it's a prospect or a customer, but like, what is a churned customer? Right. Is that the same concept? It can be tough. I do think one thing that helps is having a SQL based, like, or any other kind of like BI layer that lets you kind of, people tend to do it because it's easier to get to the report they want more quickly. So I think if you have like a bit of a BI discipline within your company, you can adopt more of a strategy that's like, we will design our product as if we're like doing normalized tables, anticipating that they'll be joined together somewhere else. And so you don't have to stamp the field. You don't have to combine them into a single thing to get it on the report the way you want.
And I think a good lesson here is that, again, we know that field is probably used for a specific purpose. We're talking about it's an iterative cycle. And maybe what we do now is that's a sign that we need to go back and update our definitions of what an account is across our different systems, or how you use these fields, and to work with our BI team to make sure that we're reporting on it on a way that it's intended. And so when we start hearing these things, really that's just a clue that maybe we need to spend some more time on this, because if people are asking you questions about it, there's probably a whole nother collection of people that want to know the same answer, but just don't even know who to ask. So.
Yep. Yeah. And I've certainly had moments where I like see one and I'm like, oh, who's the person that made this one? And oh, it was me. Yep. Like 3 years ago or something like that.
A good sign is that as the needs of a company at a certain size, Rapid7's been growing very rapidly. How we operated 3 years ago was probably valid, but we are maturing and growing as a company. We have to shift how we're thinking and how we're doing things, which is while we're breaking apart some of these processes, bringing in new stuff. And that with that opportunity is to go back and reassess what we're doing and making sure we're making the best decision again, moving forward. Because I bet they'll sign us up in 2 years to come back and talk about 5 more things I wish I knew about our order to cash process.
I truly learn something new about it every week.
So what's next for you, Kyle? What are you guys working on next?
I mean, we're actually in the thick of one of these right now, in the configuration phase, and hoping to go live in a few weeks. So, it's that initial. To me, like if you had to summarize this at the highest level, it's like this is about getting all of the details, all the metadata about our deals, our contracts into a system and handled appropriately. And like just the volume of facts there are about your deals is huge. Even if you have like pretty simple SaaS 12-month subscription, 1 or 2 SKUs, they can get complex and you've got to put that somewhere. So that's like what's most important. And that's what it's about at first. And then, you iterate and improve from there.
We are doing a very similar project. We are getting all of our contract data in the Salesforce and changing and feeding that into how we build our invoices and our quotes. And so that we have one system generating all these documents instead of invoices coming out of one system and quotes coming out of another, and making sure that it's all aligned. But we're also doing something very similar. It also matches up because we used to be a perpetual model company where you bought a license and then paid for support to now a recurring revenue model company. So we're changing how we're doing a lot of these things. And it's not like we could plan for this. Some of this stuff you could prep for, but a lot of things you didn't realize you'd have to update with a mind shift like that. So it sounds like we're doing similar things.
Oh yeah, every day, I'm sure.
And I think that's why you come to conferences like this, to see what other people are doing and see what else is out there. Because you can get kind of locked into your own mindset, and then you go to one of these things and see what other people are doing and challenges they're running into, and it can kind of open a door, open your eyes to something new.
Yep. Yeah, no, we're all solving the same kind of high level problem, but we all have different little nuances to them. So there is no like one size fits all answer to these problems. There's also no single monolithic tool that just does it all for you and will fit your business. So like you have to pick a few things based on your priorities. And if you have that, like we sell B2B and B2C requirement, then you probably need a different tech stack than we have, since we don't have to do the credit card transaction piece. It's big for sure.
But then one thing that's thrown a wrinkle in for us is that as we have an organic growth model, but then we have an acquisition-based growth model. And when you acquire a company and you get all of their products and processes and stuff sucked in, you got to either adopt what they were doing because maybe their sales model matched for that product, or do you change everything to meet your new standards? And that's why we have, I think, currently 3 different Salesforce instances, and constantly consolidating, and then we'll bring something else in. So,
that's a whole nother wrinkle of complexity is having to deal with multiple orgs and new acquisitions who it's almost easier if they have nothing.
Yes.
But they seldom do. So.
Perfect. All right. We got one more question.
Yeah. There's another. How often do you review your quote to cash tech stack?
From a technology perspective, when it starts breaking, we start looking to remove and replace. More often is business requirements change. And like I mentioned this year, because of this emphasis our CEO is saying based on customer experience, that is what has driven a lot. So if we didn't get any new business requirements or new direction from leadership, if it ain't broken, don't fix it, I guess. It's a horrible mindset to get into, but I mean, our backlog, it goes on for days. So you're constantly reassessing what's important, what's not. I don't know, how often do you guys review your tech stack?
I would say like all tech stacks get, a little bit of review quarterly. But for something as significant as your like quote to cash stuff, like these are your core systems of record, and it's not something you replace every year because something new and exciting came out. Now, thankfully, most of them are highly customizable and on platforms that are highly customizable. So it's probably possible if you have like a big shift in strategy or product offering or whatever causes you to need to revisit it, it's probably likely that you'll be able to leverage the same tool you have, but you may need, to completely redo it. So I think for the quote to cash tech stack, it's really you're more often having to review your processes, your requirements, because those are the things that are going to be changing, not the new quote to cash SaaS product out there, because it's not like they come and go really quickly. Ooh, okay.
I'd echo that. We did have to change platforms. We were doing quoting in NetSuite, and still on some deals we're quoting out of NetSuite. But that's why we brought Salesforce in. That was a transformational shift because what we wanted to do could no longer efficiently be done the way we were doing it in NetSuite. So again, that was kind of a business change or a growth change that kind of keyed on.
Yep.
So, and then what are some of the key metrics that you would use? That's the next question, Kyle.
Ooh, when reviewing the quote, the tech stack. One
thing that
you got any off the top of your head?
I mean, we track all of the errors or the exceptions that we get. And so that's kind of something that will poke its head up, is saying that how much time are we spend manually pushing stuff through our process, or where are the outliers coming in? That's going to be a metric that we follow. The number of errors, the amount of people that, if we are finding that we have to hire people just to manage the process, that's probably something that's going to trigger a review of what we're doing in that quote to cash process. If you were looking for more sophisticated metrics like dollars or deal size or something like that, that's from a technology perspective, we're usually looking at either it works or it doesn't, or you're manually having to adjust it. I don't know. Did something trigger in your mind, Kyle, for that one?
Well, one that I haven't actually implemented, but I'm kind of interested in, is like how often do reps operate kind of fully self-service without having to reach out for help, versus, what percentage is that? That's pretty interesting and perhaps enlightening if like 80% of your reps have to like get Deal Desk on the phone to get a quote out. And it might not be that the system, maybe your pricing is that complicated or whatever, but or maybe even like, end user NPS. We talked a little bit about surveying and reaching out for feedback. I guess there, plenty of normal, maybe like process or financial things, like are we getting time to invoice? Is that from booking your opportunity to actually getting an invoice out? Like, is there a bottleneck in there? Some stuff like that.
That's great.
Yeah,
we did it. We made it the hour.
All
and
right.
We still have some people with us, so I'll count that as a success.
Yeah. So I guess we're wrapping up. I guess, free feel to, if you have any other questions, find a way to reach out to us on here, and we're certainly willing and stoked to chat further.
Absolutely. Thanks, Kyle. I enjoyed it. Thanks,
yeah,
everyone.
Likewise. Thanks all for joining. See you around.
All right, see you guys.